Warning: this video proudly bears the Skorkowsky seal of certain spoilers. If you are not intending to use the product described within this video, the consequences of your poor choices reside entirely with you. Not long ago, YouTube recommended a new channel to me, which was the Armchair Keepers of Arcane Secrets. I liked the title. I went for a look, and what I discovered there were two keepers of arcane lore for the very important game to me, Call of Cthulhu, and they were discussing what is generally considered to be one of the greatest long-form, published campaigns so far, which was Masks of Nyarlathotep. Now, they're not going through this version. They're going through this version, the new one for the 7th edition of Call of Cthulhu. And what they're doing, I think, is really useful and interesting. So we've got these two gentlemen, Bob Geis and Matt Ryan, and they are both running this immense, detailed, exciting, dangerous campaign. Basically at the same time. Their start dates are a little different. They're on different session numbers, but on their channel, they're going through as a team talking about their preparation, and they're talking about the events of sessions, and which clues seemed important to the players, and which clues were missed, and what that means for the rest of the campaign as it plays out. What information will the players have at their disposal? Which information they hope the players obtain through their characters, and which ones they hope that they don't, and this sorts of stuff. It's really invaluable. It's the kind of practical discussion that I like to see on YouTube. So this is kind of meant as a reaction video. So let's take a quick look at what I'm talking about.
I love you, Bob. I've read the older edition, and I don't know if that's any less diffuse.
Very possible. It's been a few days since I've read that one.
There's like, they could do this, they could do this, they should do this, they might think of doing this. Are they going to think of investigating the Carlisle expedition?
Oh yeah.
Because there are, now we're using the HPL Historical Society prop kits. We've mentioned this a bunch.
Yep.
Right? Yep. And there's piles and piles and piles of them.
Oh yeah.
And this is one of the coolest props right here.
Oh heck yeah. Oh, is that the evidence?
This is the sealed file found in what's his name's old files. The lawyer. No.
The psychiatrist.
The psychiatrist. So the psychiatrist from the Carlisle expedition has got this sealed document.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. It's nice.
Prop, but it's like buried in there. They're never going to think to go look at this.
It is. I agree 100%. They will. Yeah, I mean, again, you got to look at this. I mean, this is a newspaper here. Look at this. This is a freaking newspaper.
We could do a whole episode about how great these.
But the point I'm trying to make is that when I hand them this about the Carlisle expedition, they're going to say, "Ooh, and they're going to want more. It's going to do its work for me, right? They're going to want to get more of that stuff. They're going to want to learn more.
You think that the newspaper articles by themselves, that's setting the hook?
Yeah. Because again, in the telegram that they get that starts the whole thing from Jackson, it says, have information about the Carlisle expedition. What's the Carlisle expedition? They'll inevitably ask. You start feeding them that stuff, it's already set. The hook is set. It will be, I've never had anybody steer away from the Carlisle expedition. What will be tricky, and what is always tricky, is making them remember who the Carlisle expedition is. London, Egypt, and so on.
As they go and they go and they go.
Yep.
Okay, let's talk more about clues. As I'm reading, when they break into that explosive first scene.
Okay, so as you see, these guys are clearly friends. They have a nice banter back and forth. They have a clear idea of what it was that they want to have be the topic of conversation for each video. The videos are kept relatively short. They're having fun with recruiting subscribers. They're having fun with the details they hint at and details they share, all the while giving very practical advice for tackling the 7th edition version of Masks of Nyarlathotep. It's pretty cool. They're sparing no expense. They've got huge groups. They are using the deluxe version of the prop set. We've got the regular version of the prop set up there. Like, this is a campaign that gets under your skin. This is a campaign that, you know, I don't run printed adventures. I just don't. I never really have. And this is the last one that I did read and run. And I've done it 4 times. So there has to be something about it that is this compelling, right? So as we go through following Matt and Bob, we are seeing this campaign play out in real time from the Game Master's perspective, and they're talking to each other about how they're doing what they're doing. I think this stuff is really valuable. It's the sort of thing that we can see on Seth Skorkowsky's channel, and where we actually look at the practical problems or challenges, maybe is a better word, that Game Masters face when they attempt to do large form projects, especially if it's their first time to attempt it with a game, or it's the first time to attempt that kind of thing. So I find it really useful and entertaining because they're engaging speakers. Now, who are these guys? Well, if you go and look at the channel, which I hope that you will, you see that they're deeply involved in conventions. If you go to any one of the major conventions, you might encounter Bob Geis, as he is involved with U2 Call of Cthulhu, where he introduces newcomers to playing Call of Cthulhu, and Matt Ryan is the official cartographer for Chaosium. You can hear a great interview with him on John Hook and Seth Skorkowsky's podcast, Modern Mythos, where he goes into his story and some about this podcast and other things. But just thought it would be fun to highlight this. And to round out this video, I thought I would share some, recap style information from my runnings of not the current version, but closer to the original version of Masks of Nyarlathotep. I ran it 4 times, as I've said, and I've approached it differently each time, as we can hear on the Arcane or Armchair Keepers channel, that they've run it multiple times, or at least Bob Geis has run it multiple times, and each time has been a little bit different. This time, as they say, they're pulling out all the stops. When I ran it for the first time, I had only been running Call of Cthulhu for a short time, and I knew I would be running this from the beginning, from the very first session that I ran of Call of Cthulhu. I knew that I was heading in this direction. Is this a game that we are going to enjoy? Would I be any good at running it? What's the game like? What is character lethality like? All of these questions. And the very first question I find that you face as a keeper of arcane lore for Masks of Nyarlathotep is, how do you start? Because it begins with, as so many Call of Cthulhu scenarios tend to do, it begins with an important change in the lives of the investigators. You're left a mansion, or someone close to you has perished and you need to go figure out why, or go to the reading of the will, or you've inherited some estate or something like that. In this way, this campaign also begins. So, how old was I then? Maybe 19 years old. It struck me that in order for this to have any real hooks, as it was really kind of my first experience with that kind of start to an adventure, in order for this to have any teeth, that this very famous character who passes away at the beginning of this campaign, well, the characters needed to really know him. The players really needed to know him. So as I was learning how to run the game, and as my group was learning how to play the game, they were interacting with this character, this Jackson Elias. This is the quintessential problem of starting the campaign. How do you introduce Jackson Elias? You can hear some creative solutions in their channel, on the Armchair Keepers channel. Mine was to actually introduce the character as a contact, and he popped up in a variety of different situations on a transatlantic cruise while they were doing research in various libraries. He was around or had been there, or they were corresponding with him, and that sort of stuff. And the character became real in that way. So by the time we get around to starting this campaign, he's established and real. Not everybody has the luxury of doing that. And so very often people are set up to, hey, let's make characters and run this very famous campaign. And then as they're beginning their preparation, they're like, oh, well, I need to basically just tell them that this guy is important and that now he's died and they should be upset about it. Not everybody reacts to that very positively. It is, as I said, one of the first challenges of running this campaign. In the new edition, they have created a whole new chapter, which basically does what I was talking about, that allows you to meet the character and formulate some experiences with them. I think opinions vary pretty widely on how well that chapter works. I don't feel like getting into it now. And so I was pleased at the decision that Bob and Matt made in cutting that chapter and doing something different. And so it was pretty cool to see what their solutions were. So it may be helpful for you to go and listen to their preparation video to find out what they did with it and how they adapted. The other big issue is that this is a world-spanning campaign, and it's famously not linear. You are going to be encountering clues that take you to, or suggest you go to, different locations everywhere you go. There's a greater number of clues, hints, and suggestions. There's a greater time pressure or impetus that pushes you in particular directions, which is the direction in which the chapters are laid out physically in the text. But you really can jump around and try it in any order. There's a suggested order. There's a timeline of events, but you can get ahead of the timeline and you can be way behind the timeline. And depending on just how eccentric your approach to that timeline is as investigators, it will determine just how much improvisation and alteration the Keeper of Arcane Lore is going to have to undertake to make the printed word make maximal sense in the moment. But generally speaking, I find that the campaign starts and moves off along the same branches, the printed order. Pretty much the same for everybody. And then somewhere around the middle, things really start to open up and people start caring about different things more, or they've missed an opportunity to make this transit to this new location, and so they take another opportunity, or some groups split up and try to cover multiple places at the same time, which then introduces the challenge of, well, this is a pretty lethal game, particularly in the pre-7th edition versions. It's still very lethal, but it was more lethal. So the experience of running the campaign wasn't so much about completing it as it was about experiencing this kind of thing and seeing how far you could get. And by its nature, you could play it multiple times and have a very different experience, or go to completely different places, or go to places in different orders and have different experiences that way. It was a eminently replayable experience, which maybe over time you'd begin to be able to complete. especially as, if you're in a group that are like there are so many of, where it's new players, right, where you're learning the game as you're facing this tremendous challenge. But this was the second problem that I faced the first time I ran it. Was I had already begun to realize how lethal it was, how unlikely it was that something this big could see the same characters make it all the way through still sane or alive. So it became very important for me to encourage the players to make connections, to create additional characters that were traveling along behind them a little later, to make connections with patron figures, and engage in correspondence as they had been doing all along with Jackson Elias, but with other people as their quest went on, which has paid off in every time that I've run it, so that new investigators could show up not long after, or like the second wave of the same group of investigators could show up not long after, and they had already been played, and they'd already been involved, and everybody knew who they were, and that kind of thing. And that there would be patrons who would wonder why the correspondence has stopped, and send investigators to look in sanitariums and cemeteries to try and figure out what happened to their agents out in the world, to keep things moving and give the group an opportunity to continue to play if that's indeed what they wanted to do. The first group that I ran it for, we did it as a marathon because we had no idea really how long it was, and so we did we started off with an 18-hour session and followed that up with another one, that kind of thing. And they went from the New York chapter on to the London chapter. They split up. They sent some people to Kenya, and these groups were wiped out, except for one lone survivor in London who wound up in a sanitarium, who then was rescued from the sanitarium, and in his babbling way tried to communicate all the things that had gone on to the people who had been sent to find out where he was, and they continued on to Kenya, and on and on it goes. Maybe the most interesting way that I've run the campaign was to extend this particular idea out as far as I could, meaning starting groups in all of the main locations at appropriate times along the timeline, and switching back and forth, sometimes at random and sometimes according to like where we are in the timeline or what kind of clues they've discovered, so that we don't spoil things. But we've got these different groups all around the world who are working on the stuff that's obviously happening in all of those locations. And we have a core group that starts in New York with the classic beginning and starts to travel around. So as they arrive in places, the players then have the option of which characters do they want to play, if they even have a character that has made that journey, and it's kind of fun. I've run it with large groups mostly, and only once in that kind of troop style. The other times it's with very large groups, and as sanity takes a hit or as fatalities arise, those players have taken a break from the campaign, and the group grows and shrinks in size as we go along, which definitely adds to the feel. But anyway, this campaign, whichever version of it that you obtain and choose to run, is definitely worth your time. Following along with the adventures of Bob and Matt as they share their journey with us, I think is also worth your time. This particular hardcover version, this is the complete original version, including the Australia chapter. The version that I ran originally, that I ran twice originally, doesn't have the Australia chapter and has a really gaudy cover with the aforementioned masks, or one mask of Nyarlathotep on it. The new one dials everything up way beyond 11 into madness. It's the one that's most easily obtainable, and has by far the most support that you could ever imagine for keeping track of all the clues, all the characters, all the locations. I definitely would have considered violence to obtain it back in the first running of this campaign for me. So it's definitely something to consider if you're just getting into Call of Cthulhu, or if you're just getting into the idea of these long form campaigns that can take a year or longer to complete. But anyway, hope this video has been fun and enjoyable for those of you who watch it, and maybe break up the serious nature of the more focused videos on the nature of RPGs, which have been coming out around it. But anyway, until the next time, take care.